Flamen would also like to thank Funders Arts Council England. And I urge you, if you haven't watched, all the shortlisted works, they're featured on our website. Spikeisland.org.uk. They'll be there live until midnight tonight. The next online screening will take place on the Town at Eastbourne website on the 5th of November. Featuring another Q&A, this time with shortlisted artists collective project artworks. Just a bit of housekeeping. The chat function is live. It's being recorded along with this evening's conversation. So do bear that in mind when you're posting. We open encourage responses for Hannah and Rosie. Please note that any form of discriminatory language will not be tolerated. And following our conversation of around 45 minutes, we'll aim to get through as many audience questions as we can. Do go ahead and post throughout the Q&A. So an introduction to our lovely artists who are joining us from Berlin this evening. Hannah Quinlan and Rosie Hastings are an artist duo working in film, drawing, installation, and performance. Their work examines the behaviors, history, politics, and artifacts of LGBTQ culture in the Western context, exploring how this culture is reflective of broader societal structures. Their collaborative practice use film as part documentary and research and part cinematic experience with an expert use of sound, color, and camera work.
Thank you. Great.
Hey, Hannah and Rosie.
Hey, I'm Rosie, by the way, and this is Hannah.
Okay, so I thought we'd start with the film's title, In My Room. Can you tell us a little bit about the significance of that title?
So the title is the title both of the film and the wider exhibition that took place at Focal Point Gallery. And the title actually comes from a song that was sung by Mark Armans when he was part of Mark and the Mambas, by the same name. And we were interested in the title because I think the theme of the film is looking at the idea of kind of like a personal sexuality that exists within your private domestic space. And sex culture and sex club and sex between men taking place in public and kind of the implications of that.
And as you mentioned, it's a title for the wider exhibition, which you showed earlier this year at Focal Point Gallery. I'm curious as to whether it was always clear during your process of research which parts of that exhibition were going to be in the film and which parts were going to make up the rest of the exhibition, like your fresco, the rubbings on paper, and the graphite drawings, and so on.
Yeah, so I think our research, we had our research and then the different ways of working sort of all came out of the same pot of research. But what's really nice about being multidisciplinary artists is that we get to explore the same idea, but from different perspectives and in different ways. So, for example, like we were making a film working with, the most contemporary technologies available, and also working with like a huge team. And then we went on this like week-long workshop in the south of France to learn how to make fresco, which is an almost obsolete medium. And what's nice is often when making film, it can feel like there's a pressure to create something that's more archival or observational, whereas with fresco or drawing, it allows you to enter like maybe a more playful space, and a space more in like the sort of imaginary. So the fresco that we made for Focal Point is called Republic, and we sort of did an interpretation of the drawing by the Renaissance artist Mantegna that we're kind of obsessed with, called Flagellation of Christ with Pavement. So for our fresco, we made a sort of pavement public scene, and we were imagining public space, the sort of question that had been preoccupying us while making the film. What would the sort of publics be like if it was occupied by women? And we were trying to imagine it. And the scene is one of like sort of intense, almost tongue-in-cheek melodrama and conflict, and it shows this woman figure being flagellated by the Romans, but we were really using it as a way to think about how it's not just men who weaponize their gender. For example, white women have been known to weaponize their gender, and we're thinking about all different fractions within discourses around feminism and sort of lesbian discourse, and so it was a sort of fantasy in the same way that the film is sort of fantasy, but it allowed us to enter this different territory. It's almost like a mirror of the film, because the film is almost all played by men, like male roles. So it's sort of an inversion, I guess, in that sense.
Yes, I think it's part of working collaboratively together as well, is that we're always kind of getting interested in a new medium, and I think because there is two of us, you are able to kind of cast your net further, and we become obsessed with kind of learning new techniques, and it's a playful way of working.
But I think also with the show, what was nice was that it allowed us to draw out elements from the film and to create this wider, landscape of our research. So, for example, one of the venues that we filmed in the film is called Bar Jester, and had this incredible mural sort of etched into graphite on the facade of the building, which showed this kind of Jester character that appears at the beginning and the end of the film. So it almost becomes this kind of mascot for the film and what we're talking about. And while we were filming, we got really interested in it, and we spoke to the owner, because we filmed 3 weeks after the venue had sadly closed, and so we spoke to the owner about the possibility of maybe exhibiting it or donating it to a museum in Birmingham, because we feel that so often when an important gay venue disappears, its whole culture goes and it's sort of unmourned for. So we decided, and as it wasn't a possibility, he wanted to put it in his garden. We went back and did some wall rubbings of it the week after, and we ended up spending a week on the streets in Birmingham, which was actually really nice because it was a good opportunity to sort of talk to the people in the area, and it's also next to the venues next to an LGBTQ centre. So we had a lot of interaction with the staff there, which we really enjoyed.
There is obviously that wider kind of complexity to the project that you mentioned, of it moving from different spaces, and I'm also curious about where you shot the actual film itself, because it sort of has its own kind of internal universe. So you shot at the Birmingham Gay Village, and Shoeburyness Fort and the surrounding woodland in Essex. I'm kind of curious about what drew you to these particular locations and how you decided to structure when and how they appear in the film.
Yeah, so the film itself is kind of divided into 3 main sections. So it begins in Bar Jester and then moves to Core Club, which is it's a gay male only sex venue that's owned by the same owner in Birmingham. And then it kind of ends in Shoeburyness Fort, which is an ex-military fort near Focal Point Gallery, and then the surrounding woodlands. And I think what first got us interested in Birmingham Gay Village specifically was during a project we were filming in 2015 and 2016, which is called the UK GABOR Directory, which is a moving image archive of over 100 different gay venues across the UK, so across 12 different cities over a year period. And we encountered, there's obviously a lot of similarities between the scenes across the UK, but then there's also, obviously each city has its own identity. And what we were struck by in 2016 was firstly how robust the scene was. And this was a time in which a lot of venues were also due to kind of changing attitudes to what kind of venues people wanted. And
austerity.
Also big link to kind of conservative austerity and being 10 years of Tory austerity. Then it was finally sort of having this huge impact upon venues. So
what we noticed that it felt incredibly robust and kind of healthy. But also what we found was that it felt like it was very dominated by these men's, sorry, apparently we're losing sound a bit, so I'll bring you closer. But what we found in Birmingham, it felt very dominated by these men's only venues, and that's similar in some other cities as well, but we had a lot of always had this sort of frustration that we couldn't, go and archive these places, but also a curiosity that we have about entering men-only sex clubs. So we went back to Birmingham as a potential site when we were thinking about making these films, and we found like a very different situation in Birmingham in 2019 than in 2015. Many of the venues had closed or were facing closure within the next 12 months. A lot of the land surrounding the gay village was being redeveloped into large apartment blocks, which obviously has a huge impact on an area with nightlife. So it really was a sort of hollowing out of the gay community. And so that sort of became like an important part of the film in a way. Like we wanted to make this film about male dominance in the gay scene and broader society by looking at the culture of public sex. But what does it mean when all 4 of the Birmingham gay men only venues had either closed or were about to close? It's sort of this culture being exposed to these new vulnerabilities, and that it felt important to recognize that in the work. So with the way we filmed it, the way we filmed them, it took on an almost archival quality, an extension of the work that we started in 2016 with the GABOR directory.
Yeah, it was kind of a mix of, because it's not like we filmed the venues only because we were closing. Like these were venues that we did, like with Jester especially, there was kind of the photographic mural inside the venue, which was kind of a reinterpretation of Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, but all kind of naked, really, all naked, really hench gay guys. So it felt like a I don't know, just like a one-to-one of what we were trying to talk about in the gay scene.
I'm trying to find it. It's really good.
It's so good. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're not paying the sound, but it's just funny.
Sure, still.
Okay, so it's kind of like this. About over the top.
It's amazing.
And there was also, obviously, the film features a pole dancing scene at the very end, and we were also interested in Bar Jester because it has this pole in the downstairs dance area, and it's a club that's been open since the 1970s, and it's gone through a lot of different iterations, and for a period of time it was no longer a gay club, and it's kind of gone through a history of... It
was men's only, there was a mix, there was men's downstairs, women upstairs.
Yeah, and it's also... Yeah, but the closing of Bar Jester was kind of separate to a lot of the issues that were affecting the other gay venues. So a lot of the venues were closing because of basically this thing called Gooch Estates owned...
It's an aristocratic family.
Yeah, they owned the land basically, and all the leases were ending at the same time. And this coincided with HS2 rail that obviously sparked this huge... new developments in Birmingham, so kind of there was suddenly this like new energy to kind of develop property in Birmingham, and but Jester basically is on the periphery of the gay scene, so it kind of faces different challenges, and the owner actually closed because he just found it too hard to keep the venue going, and he'd been running for 6 years and just
had enough of this gay scene. The other end of the spectrum with Shoebury Fort. So Shoebury Fort was an old military fort that was used to defend the southern coast of England during the First and Second World War, and then it was used as a rifle training school for in the military, and
like a gunnery.
Yeah, gunnery. So we were really interested in using a site connected with the military, because it's obviously like another zone of kind of male power, and we were thinking like, we're thinking about how male power exists on a spectrum, from the gay club, the sex club, all the way to the military, the government, in law and education, architecture. And so, yeah, I think we just wanted to draw up that element, but also just the fact that it was this kind of, I don't know, I guess it's a kind of place that would be like a sort of classic cruising spot as well.
I'm kind of curious about a few of the things that you brought up, which I think we can sort of go back to. But I wanted to know a little bit about how In My Room, the film that's nominated for the award, is sort of diverges from your previous work, Something for the Boys, and whether the ways in which you think it diverges were ways that you anticipated when you were making it, or you were sort of pulled in a particular direction while you were making it.
Would you say diverges?
Yeah, I think aesthetically there's definitely, it diverges in the sense that there's a lot of it is shot outdoors and kind of outside of venues, whereas Something for the Boys, a film we made in 2018,
set in Blackpool,
is shot in, it's all takes place inside the interior of these two different gay venues. I think there's definitely connections. I think our use of dance and music and Something for the Boys was actually inspired by looking at kind of like historical links between musical theatre and the LGBTQ community, specifically in Blackpool, which has a huge history of venues that are catered towards basically that form of entertainment, so cabaret. But yeah, I think this.
Yeah, I think they kind of develop. I see some In My Room as kind of development of what we kind of learn in Something for the Boys, and also of our performance practice, where we work a lot with video and music. But I think the UK GABOR directory that we spoke about earlier is such a foundational work, because we went to pretty much every single gay scene in the UK. We learned so much, we met so many people, we did so much research, and I think it serves as this kind of foundational research, something. And after we made it, we kind of felt like, we've gone to all these places, we filmed them on this like shitty GoPro camera, and as we develop our film practice, returning to these sites and doing further research, spending more time there, getting to know the communities better, getting to know the venues better, going back with a proper camera to do these venues justice. I do think like that's something that runs through our film practice. And I think that when we signed for Boys, it was our first time working with dance, and then for In My Room, it was our first time working with a choreographer, and it kind of it feels like
I like that sense of, I guess, the kind of continuity in the directory being foundational to how you research, I suppose. But also there's also continuity in some of your collaborations. But you mentioned this was the first time you worked with a choreographer, with Les Childs. I'm curious about how you found each other and how the process of working together for this film was like.
We love Les.
Yeah, Les is amazing. But we found Les through producer who we'd worked with on Art Night, who's called Kamal Akri, and he basically he was like, you need to work with a choreographer, and because we had never even we were kind of like, I mean, Something for the Boys was our first, I would say, like proper film, so it's the first film in which we had enough budget to actually consider working with a team outside of ourselves. And we actually ended up, we were like, okay, we want to work with Les. And then we had this really drawn out, confusing communication with Les, where we like met up with him and spoke on the phone, in which we thought we were about to work with him as a dancer, and he thought we were about to work with him as a choreographer. And then he was like, no, girl.
He's like, I don't dance anymore.
He was like, I'm fat. And we were
he's not fat.
He's not fat at all. But then we were like, yeah, this is actually amazing.
And then we were like, yeah, we need a choreographer. Like, we didn't know what we're doing with dance, really.
But
so
yeah,
that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, and then he was just amazing at interpreting kind of like our ideas and like working from like YouTube clips that we found really inspiring, and then kind of producing choreography in that way through conversations with us. And he brought in
he introduced us some dancers, like Paul Libbard and Matthew Hawkins.
Yeah, Matthew Hawkins.
Who were, because one of the things in the film, we wanted to cast older dancers, as well as we wanted to have like intergenerational dancers, because that's something that we really love about gay bars, I guess. It's like you get, it's, supposedly intergenerational, and you kind of learn from your elders and all that kind of thing. But it's so hard to cast like older, and specifically like older gay dancers. So yeah, Les was really good at helping us with his network, and whoever with my company helped us, and yeah.
Nice. That was going to be really my kind of question about some of the people cast. I know you've worked with Ted Rogers.
Yeah,
previously, and Ted has this brilliant solo moment in the film, which is really great. Can you tell me a little bit about working with Ted?
So we first worked with Ted on something for the boys. He kind of, what's amazing about Ted is actually that he trained in musical theatre, and obviously something for the boys was looking at this, so he could.
But he's also worked as a go-go dancer.
Yeah, and he's worked as a go-go dancer. And the role we wanted in something for the boys was this go-go dancer who had musical theatre aspirations. So he was kind of like the perfect embodiment of this. But also,
he's really good at channeling sort of these types of man that in his personal life he's nothing like it. But if we're like, you're an evil white gay guy, he'll get what we mean by like, being ultra masculine.
It's like mask drag.
Yeah, he's like, it's almost like this kind of masculine drag. And he can really inhabit these different personas, almost, in a cartoonish kind of way.
And then also the singer Jesse Holtberg, who we had also previously worked with, who's had like a long musical career. So he was in a band with David Wojnarowicz.
Wow.
Like a really amazing queer artist. He's based in New York and in a band called Three Teens Kill Four.
In the 1980s.
Yeah. So he's had this really amazing, and he was always very involved in like the art scene in New York. So he's got a very interesting perspective.
Kind of knew everyone. That icon.
Yeah.
So.
And it's funny with Jesse, I feel like we're always asking him hates.
He's like, why do I have to say this shit?
So I think we're always kind of, to a certain extent, there is also, we kind of make roles in which I don't think the performers are being themselves necessarily. Characterization going on, and often kind of working in this like quite exaggerated, stereotypical way of working with people.
I like this phrase you used before, tongue-in-cheek melodrama, as a kind of an overarching kind of sensibility or an aesthetic, which is really good. The person, I guess, who really sort of helps shape your collaborations or your projects is Owen Pratt, the musician whom you've worked with on other projects. Again, same question, sort of curious to how you found each other and what it was like working on this particular film.
So I'm really old friends with Owen, and we've worked with him for quite a number of years now, so we have like a really close working relationship in collaboration. And what we find, music is such an important part of our practice in film and performance. And what we find really amazing about Owen is that we can talk to him in a way that is so kind of like ephemeral and abstract and visual. We can talk in terms of moods, or like a sort of feeling that we want to create, or like a kind of vision. And often we'll start making the music quite a while before we've shot any film. So it's often the first thing that we'll start thinking about when we're working on something. And yeah, Owen's really good at taking that sort of more visual kind of side and turning it into. And what I think is really great is that he kind of amplifies everything to quite an extreme degree. So if we want something to feel anxious, he knows how to push it so hard that it just feels really intense.
We had this problem. There's this strip scene in the film where the music kind of reaches this crescendo. And I think there's like multiple crescendos in the film in terms of the music. And we were like, it's just too Star Wars. And we had this constant back and forth where we were like, too Star Wars.
Too Space War.
Too Star Wars. And he was like, what do you mean it's too Star Wars? And we were like, it just sounds like there's a space battle.
Yeah. And like with Owen, that's going to max like once every 3 minutes. So,
but yeah, he's really amazing as well at working with kind of like existing music. So kind of like the Mark and the Mambas song is not necessarily the most well-known song. The film also features Just Want to Have Fun, and also I've forgotten the name of the song. It's like quite,
look at this
dance song. I can't remember the name of the song, but that, I mean, for me, it's very like recognizable. The one that happens when the outdoor line dancing scene, basically.
Yeah. But the way that we use music in the films is really to try and draw the viewer in emotionally and create quite a strong emotional connection with the viewer. And what we've found in our work is that we try and be quite kind of emotionally, I want to say like generous, I don't know if that's the right word, but we kind of want to keep it on and make it super emotive. And we think that's a really good way as an artist to be able to create a connection between the viewer and sort of what you're interested in, like the gentrification of Birmingham gay village or the vulnerabilities that gay male sex spaces are facing in 2020.
It's definitely, I think, it's this strange balance, because on the one hand there's obviously kind of the foundation of the GABOR directory, which, I mean, again, it's not an archive. It uses, if anyone's familiar with it, the audio is, so basically the audio in that, we used sampling from what songs happened to be playing in the venue, and then kind of like changed and manipulated the pop music to, sometimes it was quite like scary and like put these different effects on it. So I think there's always this very like kind of this archival impulse that is then put through this feed of like, as we say, like melodrama and theatricality, and it is ultimately fantasy.
Yeah, I think in the copy the Jarman Award said that we are documentary makers, and I think to some extent we archive things, and so but we're not documentary because we're fantasists. And
it's definitely a total fantasy, and I think kind of verging on horror film in this.
I guess there is a certain mood that's evoked, and a kind of obliqueness to how you're approaching the archive that just makes it so much more, so much more kind of compelling, for want of a better term, as an into those histories. I guess the other thing I wanted to go back to was, you mentioned the different aspects of In My Room and the various dances, which you mentioned some of the collaborators. There's also the pole dance scene, which is quite memorable. Yeah. It's sort of acrobatic and super, athletic and really amazing. And I'm curious about that particular scene and what you were trying to achieve with that.
So with Lucille's scene, Lucille Marshall is a dancer. She's also a pole dance champion. I think she did Royal Ballet, she's done contemporary dance, she's kind of done everything. And when we met her, she literally given birth to a baby like 3 weeks before she filmed. And it was kind of unbelievable what she did. Like she's so amazing. But so Lucille's the only woman who appears in the film. And when we imagined the scene, we were kind of imagining like a moment of crisis or upheaval within the film. And we were thinking about how, in particular with Lucille's scene, we were thinking about how women access public space and public sex culture. And often And often it's unlike men who are often accessing public sex culture as for their leisure or pleasure, women access it through their labour as workers, as sex workers, or cleaners, or managers. Thinking about this, we're particularly thinking about in the film about this idea of risk, like who's able to take risks. And obviously, for different people, the risk of how you behave in public is different. And I think we saw Lucille's scene as kind of emancipatory or kind of liberatory, and also just kind of almost posing a question. And then I think the song that comes on, Girls Just Want to Have Fun, I think that's like another tongue-in-cheek moment.
It's really interesting though, because when we first went to the venue, we spoke to the manager, so the clothing, and he basically down the road from Jester is this big strip club called Scarlet's, and he said that basically when the club closed, because Jester was a super late night venue, that lots of the girls would come and they would like use the pole, but so they had their work pole and then there was kind of like the leisure pole, so there was kind of like this precedent for the pole in that venue being used in that way.
And even Lucille was like, oh my God, how many, every pole dancer from Birmingham we spoke to was like, how many drunken nights have I had in the Jester on that crappy pole?
Yeah, she was like, because most poles doesn't rotate, so
we had to bring in another pole as well.
It's not a good pole.
But yes, and the rest of the film, like what we were trying to work with Les to think about how masculinity, to kind of reimagine masculinity as a series of codes and gestures. And we were also thinking about how communication and cruising spots is largely non-verbal, kind of reimagining this non-verbal communication as a dance and thinking about how masculinity gets reproduced in these spaces. So that was a kind of premise of thinking about the most of the dance, and we were really interested in this type of dance which is very disconnected from everything that we're talking about. It's an American dance called the line dance, and it's kind of like a cowboy dance, I guess. That's how I think about it. And it's where you have the leader who is kind of leading the dance, and then behind him is maybe like, I don't know, a group of like 10, 20 people who are following him. And it's performing a series of scripted moves. So there's like, I don't know, what are they called, like the grapevine or the twist or whatever. And for each song, the leader will like have an arrangement and the people will follow. And we were thinking about this kind of gesture of being led and leading, and how important that is in terms of the reproduction of gender and sexuality in space, and particularly about the reproduction of gender in public space and the sort of public forum, and how that reinforces our ideas of ourselves and how we relate to our communities.
Yeah, there's something that I was thinking about, a contrast that exists between what you've just described, these kind of like choreographic formations or these dances, I suppose, where you have that kind of group dynamic that's so prescribed, and then it contrasts with the intimacy at the start of the film with like the two men dancing together and stuff, and there are all these kind of these different textures to how you're approaching ideas of performance, I suppose.
Yeah, it felt important to like leave a lot of the dance quite improvised and unscripted. So at the beginning, we showed a video of this, like, it's called a shadow dance, and it's like it's a video we found on YouTube of these two kind of like cowboy guys that kind of ultra masculine, but then they're performing this dance which is just so tender and intimate, and where they're kind of leaning into each other, and we used that and we sort of built on it. And it's a dance that goes between being quite intimate and vulnerable and then getting quite violent as well. And it felt, I don't know, I guess because we were working with gay men as well who had experiences with these areas, like it felt really important to leave scope for like the dancers to bring in their own sort of vulnerability. And really keen, obviously what we were making the work about is quite a provocative area, and we felt keen to like keep the film open for multiple interpretations, and I don't know, to kind of complicate the narrative instead of making everything really simple, I think.
Yeah.
We just had a question, actually just a quick reminder to our audience members, if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll get to those shortly. I'm not sure if this came in before you mentioned it or not, but we have a question that says, can you talk about your earlier 2014 project GABOR at GABOR directory, or at GABOR, sorry. Maybe explain a bit to the audience about what it was, how it came about, and how you think that way of working influenced practice going forward. And maybe
shout out if you ever remember that.
And then we can segue maybe into your working as a duo, working collaboratively as a duo.
So at GABOR was basically, I don't remember.
It's like a live event series. Yeah.
So when was it?
2014. It's the first thing we ever did together.
Kind of. Basically, at GABOR came out of, we were running a queer theory reading group out of our bedroom, and we were having all these conversations about kind of all of us hoping that there was like a space in which we could gather in, that you could kind of embody some of these theories, politics. And obviously it also came out of a frustration with the mainstream GABOR scene in London where we were living, and kind of feeling like these spaces didn't necessarily facilitate for everyone. So basically at GABOR we built fully functional gay bars. We built one in our bedroom, our studio space. We did one at David Roberts Art Foundation, which was kind of the culmination of the project. And we would work like incredibly collaboratively. So we would work a lot with our close friend Chloe Fulani and Sam Cottington and Casper Heinemann and Natasha Lal, and kind of
so many people.
Big group of people, and
we'd host events. So we'd put on these. So we'd spend like weeks building these crazy bars, and we'd like be working these day jobs, and we'd be spending all our money on these bars, and then we'd have them open for one night only. And me and Hannah would work the bar, and we'd sell like £3 cocktails, but we'd always hire these really fancy glasses, which is so stupid because they all get smashed. And then we'd normally like use performances or readings, or once we made like a collaborative video, or dance,
it was basically it's basically the place in which it became the place in which we showed our work. So kind of we were working in CGI animation at the time, so we were showing films, and it's actually the first place we showed the videos from the UK GABOR directory. Was at a New Year's Eve party we hosted, and we had it on the screens in the bars. So it was super informative to all the work we now make.
Yeah, it was like when we were doing at GABOR, I wouldn't really say that we had a formal gallery practice. And I don't even know if we saw ourselves as artists. Somehow we were occupying this territory of being in the art world, but we also saw it as something more grassroots and like community facing. But I think it was such an experimental space where we were kind of building everything from scratch. And as Hannah said, it's the first place where we started showing videos. So I think from at GABOR, we kind of grew ourselves and our practice as artists. So it's a pretty amazing time. And then we actually stopped doing it. We did an event at David Roberts, and it was really amazing. We like had a budget for the first time ever, so we could build not a great budget, but still a budget, which was pretty amazing back then.
We did the 3-week bar after that.
But basically,
the nail in the coffin was we did a 3-week long bar,
and keep the Brexit one in 2016,
which was way too much to take on.
But we kind of felt like as we were growing into more of a gallery practice, we felt like somehow it kind of, I don't know, it almost like disrupted like the collaborative dynamic that we had, and we felt like it was so important to the people that we work with and to the people who came to our venues. Like, it almost felt like we were a family, and it felt like, I don't know, like as we were growing as artists and growing into the art world, like it was hard to maintain at GABOR as this mutually beneficial space. So I think we decided to leave it behind us and move on.
Wow. That sounds great. Thanks for that question. That was from Greta, I think.
Thanks, Greta.
My other sort of follow-up was, what is it like for you working together as a duo in terms of producing or working on film in particular, and then working on your other stuff, the drawing and the painting and stuff? How do you sort of work together?
We fight a lot.
No, we don't fight that much. Yeah, I don't know. Rosie always says we started working together because she couldn't handle being apart.
Yeah.
Too codependent.
We're really codependent. Yeah, I feel like we formed this quite unique way of living and working, which requires us to be together every second of every day, which is, except Christmas, which is the worst time of the year. Yeah, which is pretty amazing. But as you know, we've spoken a bit about collaboration. It's always been really important to our practice, and I kind of think collaboration is almost like having a superpower. It allows you to extend kind of, I don't know, beyond the confines of your own skills and also like it's like an emotional superpower, because I think so much of being an artist is about taking risks and entering territory where you are quite uncertain, and you're trying to create something that, communicates about something that you feel is really important. And I think me and Hannah, having two of us, means that we take bigger risks and we don't let each other be scaredy cats. And we kind of, I don't know, and we're incredibly critical of each other. And I think that allows us to produce more critical work. And I think it also gives us this template of collaboration that we can extend to our other collaborators. So, for instance, someone who we haven't mentioned is Rosie Taylor, who's the cinematographer that we work with, who we studied at Goldsmiths with, and she also works with us as an editor. And so, I don't know, I feel like when we're working with Rosie, we're almost like a throuple. There's kind of three of us in the relationship. So, yeah.
I like the sentiment of an emotional superpower in a way, but also
really?
Thinking about...
It's scary, yeah.
Thinking about these things is like, I guess it's a muscle that you exercise in a way, a kind of collaborative skill, and something that's enduring, that happens over a long time, I think can have like real benefits. Yeah. My next question is about your kind of relationship to the history of queer cinema, queer filmmaking, moving image, whatever you like to call it. Kind of curious, I've heard you speak before about your relationship to Jarman in particular, how you both came from sort of different angles to Jarman's work. I think one of you through reading, through text, and then another through film itself.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Jarman's like a real classic in the mood board whenever we make a film, but also Isaac Julian and Paul. Yeah, we were about this. We did the talk. He was saying that, like, although like all these artists and directors inform us and we've learned so much from them, often it's more, I'd say it's like more informal videos that inspire us the most. So, for example, like we'll spend like every time we start a new project, we'll spend quite a few hours just trawling YouTube, watching, queer people dancing in their bedrooms by themselves, and I think somehow those are the videos that feel the most like raw and emotionally intense and like risky. So we draw a lot from them.
Yeah, and then just film in general. It's like the shot of Jesse with the light on his face is like, that's inspired by the shot in Apocalypse Now of the guy's face. Just stuff like that. You end up kind of getting, especially with cinematography, there's obviously like, regardless of the content of the film, you like become drawn to certain aesthetic qualities, and like like David Lynch is a big inspiration of ours in terms of visually.
I think also like our own archival film that we've been building since we started working together. So like one of the first things we did together alongside at GABOR is like we got invited to go on this little residency to Lithuania, to like Vilnius in Lithuania. And we were like, God, what should we do? We don't know what to do. So we, there's only one GABOR in Lithuania. So we were like, we should go there and like film it. And so it was so amazing. It was kind of crazy. Fantasia, like absolute Maximus Janus.
And every week they would run a free bus from Belarus
yeah,
to the GABOR, because it was like literally the only gay venue in the whole area.
Wow.
So it's pretty amazing. We filmed it, and like we have all that footage. We never used it like in a gallery setting or whatever, but we have all that footage, and it kind of is something that we'll refer back to alongside this crazy amount of footage that we've collected over the years. So it's almost like filming our lives, I guess, in a way.
Normal TV shows. Just been watching some really embarrassing trash this lockdown. So yeah.
Okay, go on. What's on the list?
We've actually just been rewatching True Blood.
A classic.
Yeah. Vampires really going for, it's really nice shot though, like amazing Southern American landscape. I'm not going to pretend that it's intellectually linked, but
no, that's no need to. We've got a question on the chat from Rosa Tyhurst, and she says, I'm curious about the wall installed at Focal Point that you had to walk past and around to get to the film. Can you say more about that one, please?
So the wall, we were kind of interested in the wall for multiple reasons. So
should we explain it? What it looked like?
Yeah. So basically, it's kind of a rectangular room with doors on one side, and then we split the room with a stud wall that was clad in kind of mismatched pieces of wood, and then these Victorian window frames with the glass in, and kind of the glass had been partially obscured with like dust and stuff that was just on them when we found them. So when you enter the space, it means that you view the film through these windows, and then when you walk around, we had a yellow light on the other side of the wall, so you through the windows as if you were outside a building.
And then inside a building looking out when you're on the other side.
Yeah, just that inside, outside art thing. And then, but also kind of the wall was reminiscent of this, I don't know, in a lot of sex clubs you have these kind of like fake exterior walls kind of built into spaces.
Or like mazes.
Like it's, the Gothic maze.
Yeah. But I think it was about highlighting this sense of risk and voyeurism as you walk into the space, kind of, recreating the feeling of walking into like maybe like a sex club or a cruising spot. But then playing with that idea of risk was also, it could also kind of feel like maybe a dark alleyway, and it could feel a bit uncomfortable. So I think we were just trying to draw those qualities out of the film into the way you entered the room.
Cool, thanks. Just a reminder, if anyone's got any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we can ask those. I guess I was going to ask you about your current project, the one you're working on at the moment, if you wanted to talk a little bit about that one, the one you're in Berlin for. We
literally finished the work for our new show yesterday, so it's all a bit raw and fresh and traumatic. But yeah, we're currently in Berlin, and we've been in 6 and are about to open a show at Isabella Bortolozzi Gallery, which is a German commercial gallery that we're now represented by, and it's our first show at the gallery, so we're very excited to be working with them. The show is called Public Affairs, and it's all fresco and drawing, and quite often, like when we do a very big ambitious film project, it kind of feels like we have to like retreat away from the world into our studio, where it's just me and Hannah, and just spend hours in our pajamas obsessively drawing and now painting as well.
And then you retreat from drawing. You basically
you go from one to the other.
Swing from one to the other. So it's a series of fresco works and drawings, and the show looks at kind of the relationship of the LGBTQ community to hate crime legislation, specifically in the UK, and kind of looking at kind of historically how.
Well, we were just thinking about how it's quite a complicated relationship. So obviously it felt like there was an urgent need for hate crime legislation because, like especially recently, like the rise of hate crimes against LGBTQ people, and as a way to legally insert LGBTQ people into like, homophobes could be accountable. But I think it also had the repercussions of sort of extending the carceral system and sending more people to prison. And as we all know, like the people, people of colour and working class people with mental health problems are just, more disproportionately represented in the prison industrial complex. So we're thinking about this kind of complex relationship. And the show has a loose narrative, and all the drawings and paintings are set in and around Green Park in London, which is like an incredibly kind of politically charged area. On one side you have the Houses of Parliament, and then you've got the Horse Guards Parade, like the military, and then you also have what's the palace? Buckingham Palace, the monarchy. So it's like the holy diadem, but it's also where like gay pride happens. It's where like every protest happens. So that's kind of what drew us to the area. But then somehow like all the works look quite like tropical and luscious because of all the trees and
I don't know, there's obviously a lot of foliage.
We really had to but it starts off with this drawing called The Assault, a colour pencil drawing, and it shows like a kind of attack scene between men and women, but there's no attack actually happening, kind of acting in this kind of incoherently violent way, but it's you don't see any actual violence. And then the rest of the paintings show the kind of aftermath of the event, and you see some people who you assume to be like police, but then maybe a victim. And it's kind of, we were thinking of these more ambiguous kind of roles and kind of leaving it to the viewer and like maybe their unconscious bias to decide like who's the attacker and who's the victim, who's the perpetrator, who's in the position of authority. And then the show ends with a fresco painting of this sign that's outside the Old Bailey, and it says, "Defend the children of the poor and punish the wrongdoer," which is, so the Old Bailey is like the central court of justice in the UK. It's a very old building. And we just thought that the sign was so remarkable. And just a kind of really intense statement, especially because, as we know, like the judicial system punishes the children of the poor and it protects the wrongdoer. So I don't know, we just were drawn to it, I guess.
The sign's actually featured there's this Hitchcock film called The Paradigm Case, and the sign flashes up at one point, and we were like, what is that sign? When we assumed it was
part of a set.
Yeah, we assumed it was a prop because we were like, that is the most intense thing to have written on a public building. But what we got interested in about the Old Bailey is that inside they have these incredibly like morally subscriptive murals painted on the walls, kind of all of them being derivative from biblical texts. So there's this like crazy relationship between the justice system in the UK, and this kind of like moral overriding religious backdrop that kind of is still so pervasive
in like legal decision making. It's why we were interested in fresco as well, because like fresco painting, it's also it feels like it's got a role to play in society in the way it's often found in buildings of legal, political, educational importance. And it often shows an image that is morally instructive and kind of loaded, and that presents itself as universal, which, you know, often is anything but. So we were just, I guess we were drawn to fresco because it I don't know, it just feels, like it plays this kind of moral guiding role in society. It's quite interesting.
That's a perfect segue into a question that I've just received, which is to think about the similarities and differences between how you create narrative in your own frescoes versus, say, the kind of storytelling function of the film, if there is one. I suppose just sort of off the back of that kind of moralizing impulse that the kind of source material that you occasionally encounter is using and this stuff. Where do you want to sort of position your own kind of your frescoes versus, say, the devices that you use in narrative for your films and stuff?
I think there is crossover. Kind of in our drawings, there's often, I think we always go for this kind of ambiguous. There's always this ambiguous kind of cluster of people in which it could be interpreted in multiple ways. And I think similarly with our films, there's, as we say, there's like a definite characterization, and we kind of play with the idea of like baddie and goodie, and like this idea that there's kind of like something sinister happening or something kind of like more like joyful happening. And I think, as Rosie says, we always want to kind of have room for multiple interpretation, and it's normally kind of with all our work, it's often a celebration and a critique of LGBTQ culture and the way it's kind of manifested in the UK context, and kind of
it's almost like finding points of tension. Work, kind of research, and then
contradiction.
Nice. This might be a good question to end on. It's from Michelle Williams-Garmaker. Hey, Michelle. Michelle says, "Thank you, Hannah and Rosie. XXXX. Would love to hear more about your love of Mantegna."
Oh, wow.
Perfect question.
Best question ever.
We are true fans. So it was sparked by, we saw this huge series of paintings called The Triumph of Caesar, which was on show at the RA, which are these amazing, giant, kind of square, quite loosely completed paintings that kind of depict this fictional idea of, the triumph of Caesar, and kind of it's this procession where everyone's holding up various different trinkets to show his success.
But then they kind of all look quite anxious and worried, and they almost quite alienated. You know, they're in this crowd, but they look quite alienated.
Yeah, his work's definitely, I would say it's not realistic. It's quite like cartoonish in the way it looks, and I don't know, just super detailed, and like use of color and the expressions of the people, and like the diversity of bodies in his images. He'll have like incredibly like elderly people, and then like
really cartoony evil people. But we're quite, in our drawing practice, we're real try hard. Like, we started drawing in 2017, kind of after we filmed the GABOR directory, which was really hard work to make, and it was really exhausting. Like, we were literally traveling for 9 months, and drawing was this kind of way to retreat, I think, from public life and being in the gay community a bit, and to, I don't know,
it's like it was for us, it felt like a lot more intimate way of working. And I think we were drawn to a lot of work in the Renaissance, I guess, because it has this overarching kind of like religious subtext. So you have this like incredibly stark difference between like who's the victim in the scene and like who is the perpetrator. So kind of like the flagellate, which is the image that inspired the fresco, Jesus being like publicly flogged by Roman soldiers. So you have this like such the dynamic of power is so explicit, and I think that is a theme that runs throughout. So kind of like his painting of the crucifixion. Like again, you have the Roman soldiers gambling.
Their amazing camp pink outfits.
He's just really good at the soldiers.
And I think like his use of perspective, and as Hannah said, his use of characterization, his kind of skill and figurative representation is something that it's almost like he's our role model and we aspire, like and I don't know, we have about a few artists where I get to that level, and it's kind of which maybe is not possible, but it's really, I think our drawings are so kind of focused and like small and difficult and like tricky. I think it's that like trying to get to that point, that's what really motivates us through every like unbearable hour of drawing.
I love that. That's great. I feel like that's a worthy goal. And I guess the sense of there's always a latent eroticism, I feel, in a lot of those depictions of like biblical religious. So the campness is never too far away. Thanks so much, you two. It's been a pleasure chatting with you both. Just a quick reminder to everyone watching that this year's online tour runs until the 27th of November, and the winner of the Film London Jarman Award will be announced with a special online presentation on the 24th of November. You can watch all the nominated work on our website, spikeisland.org.uk, including In My Room by Hannah and Rosie. The work will remain live until midnight. And for more on Spike Island's upcoming exhibitions, events, screenings, please see our website and sign up to our mailing list. I think there's some information in the chat that one of my colleagues has just popped in. And again, many thanks, Hannah and Rosie, for joining me in conversation this evening.
A great host. And thank you, Spike Island, as well. And thank you, Film London and the Jarman Award.
Yeah. Thanks to Greta and the team at Flamin. Thank you to my colleagues at Spike working behind the scenes and assisting. And thanks to everyone for tuning in. Until next time.
Everyone. Bye.
See you.